Okay, so this introduction to Teams use is going to be how to use some of the tabs at the top of Teams, of channels. Primarily how to upload and edit files in the Files tab, but also just a brief introduction to some of the other primary tabs. So I'm starting here in my sandbox team, which is one that I have made with no membership in order to play around. And this is quite a good idea if you want to have a risk-free learning environment. So I've got here the General tab, and what I've done, just of note I suppose, is I've got my teams in a list rather than as tiles, and you can do that by clicking on the settings down here, going to switch view, and you can toggle whether you have a grid or a list. And a list is just easier to manage really. It feels a lot more like mailboxes or File Explorer. Once in this channel, and this is the general channel within the sandbox team, you've got your normal chat here. Okay, this is just where I've been experimenting with different types of meeting. And then up here we've got files. Every channel that is created comes with its own version of these, its own chat, its own files, its own notebook, and its own, this is the Planner app, but you can also add, as I think I mentioned in a previous video, a variety of apps, and you will be adding to them as we test various purchased and third-party apps and find use for them. You can add whatever apps are most appropriate for the purpose of the channel and the purpose of the team that you have created. So in the Files tab, there's nothing here at the moment, okay? So you can either create a new document within it, and this is very much like using the browser-based version of your OneDrive for Business, okay? So you can create any Microsoft type thing. You can create folders, and what we'll do is create a folder here and call it Test Materials. Okay, so I can either add or create a file, or I can add or create a folder. And so here I'm just making a folder for the sake of practice. And then I'm going to upload a random Word document. And now we've got here a random file that anybody that is a member of this team can see. The way to limit file visibility is either for the channel that you host it in to be a private channel, which means that it has a subset of members from the larger team. But as this is the general strand, this is a standard channel, and therefore anyone that is a member of the team can see this file. I can then click on the link and go into the file. It will open it, and this is the way that you might view, say, an agenda that's been put up rather than emailing it as an attachment to those that will be attending the meeting. And within this, I can now click on Edit. It opens it in a Word browser that you can then open in the desktop app if you want full functionality. But for most things really, with the exception of some stylings and some review functions, the browser version of Word and Excel and PowerPoint is perfectly good for most people's needs. And so what I would do here is I can now edit this however I like and change it to anything in the world. Okay. As you do each keystroke, it is saving it up here. You can change the name of it, just again like in any OneDrive file. You can also look at the version history in case there are multiple versions saved. It's a little bit like the auto-save recovery of a file. When, say, your computer crashes, it will pick up, it will have saved at that moment what you've done until that point, and you can open that version if you like, or revert to an earlier version. So version history is quite useful for if there is something that you really wish you'd kept in from a previous version but had edited, removed, and closed the document before realizing that. You can also say whether you are reviewing, editing, or just viewing, and so that's a way to almost protect yourself. With its security access, you can also change what people can do to it. So you can make it a read-only version if necessary, and that's something I'll cover in a later video more related to OneDrive use, as it's the exact same functionality and the same sort of options that you're using. What's quite useful in these sort of features, particularly if it's a live document, if it's a document that you're trying to work on together, because ultimately what Teams is not supposed to be used for and where it can fall down is being used for meetings, for posting notification that you've stuck a document in a folder and for people to view documents in folders. It's not for that. It is a collaborative workspace that happens to be a great way of communicating with your team. And so what you can do with each document is open this comments tab, and you can add comments to it wherever you want to make a comment, just like normal viewing, and people can reply to them. You can tag people, so @mention, and if I type in the @, I get my most recent or most common people that I contact, whether that's email or tagging. Responses are. So I'll discard that comment. And the other thing that you can't see here because it's just me using it is that if someone else is viewing or editing the document at the same time, and this is where version history is very useful, it will tell you who is currently looking at something. So if you post that you've added a document, when you go to look at it yourself, you might see that someone else is reading it at the same time, or someone else is adding a comment. And it really is a fantastic way of live working, of keeping momentum in work. Giant gaps between action is what can slow us down. And so being able to work in this way rather than waiting for someone to tell you they've done something, you can even turn on notifications in a more complex SharePoint way of working so that you know when someone has edited the document, it can ping you a message. So this is quite good for student work where you might have a student that's asked you for feedback on their final year project paper, and they are basically sat at home waiting for you to complete the feedback and send it back to them because they're too afraid to do any work on it in the meantime in case you suggest to do something against what they've done. But if you share documents in this way, whether it's in Teams or whether it's in OneDrive, and a student has shared their work with you, you add comments and suggestions that they will then see and they can act on in real time. It really does massively increase our efficiency. So that was a relatively brief overview of. You'll see here that when you open a document for the first time, it says to ensure the best possible experience for users, Word will be view only by default. So this is quite useful when you've put a brief up. It will only be read only, so you won't accidentally change something in it. You can highlight parts of text, but you can't accidentally change it. You have to click on edit. So it takes a lot of the risk out of it for you. Okay, so I hope you found that useful. Please do let me know if there's any other functions that you'd like to know about.